we've marched on through those 67 years, and we've continued to evolve, expand through technology, through the better understanding of the business, and through the people's love of our business. I mean, that's what's been amazing. The people love us.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Doing great. Now, for people who listen to this audio only, do they know that when we do the video, when you say fantastic, we both kind of lean back and then charge forward towards the camera?
There is sort of a united, I don't know, it's like synchronized swimming. It's like synchronized fantasticking.
Zooming.
I don't know.
Synchronized zooming.
There you go. Oh, I like that. I like that.
Anyway, subscribe or don't subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already. But I have a question for you.
Bring it.
Matt, you've been in the industry for many years now. You started out at the front line. Do you remember when you fell in love just with the business side of the industry, right? You had been a consumer for so long, and then you realized, oh, look at all the things that just make it work and make it come together. So it may not be the business. Well, I guess it's part of the business, but it was the fun aspect of it. Right. And I remember that my very first ride that I ever learned how to run was the Roundup at Canopy Lake Park. And if you don't know what that ride does, it goes around, then it goes up. So it's very, very descriptive in the title. But I remember just being able to have fun with the guests. And, I'd worked at a supermarket before that. I had mowed lawns. I actually did telemarketing for a couple of weeks. That was awful. But I just remember, and this was in my first season, just really, as people were coming onto the ride, joking with them. And then, when I was kind of giving my spiel, having fun with them. And yes, I had to clean up my share of, code sevens or whatever you want to call them in the industry, right? At your place. But it was such a fun time, and I got paid for it. So I think that was sort of the first thing that kind of got into my blood when you talk about what was the thing that got me to kind of say, this is what I want to do in the industry. And then as I moved up through leadership roles, then it became, how can I make sure that other people are having fun? So it wasn't just the guests I was having fun with, but I was trying to make sure that my team was having fun so that they could, make sure the guests were having fun. And then along the way, then you learn, oh, we got to do a budget, right? And then there's other things that go into this, but it was all sort of centered around having fun. Yeah. So are you telling me that being a ride operator in an amusement park is more fun than being a telemarketer?
1,000,000%.
Shocked.
Yes. I am. So what about you?
Yeah, I distinctly remember it was my first day of my first job in the industry. So growing up, I had been a consumer of the product, right? Visiting many parks, riding roller coasters, whatever it was. And then when my first summer working at Cedar Point, I remember the night before my first day, I had this similar type of giddiness that I would have when I was visiting, and it was the night before opening day, right? That's how it felt for me. So it was almost the exact same feeling where I couldn't even sleep very well, but I wasn't exhausted or fatigued or anything. It was just pure adrenaline. Well, I guess there was going to be adrenaline later in the day, but just the idea of it was so exciting. I remember I woke up maybe about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. And I didn't have to be at work until at least 8 o'clock. And I realized, I said, oh, they told me yesterday that this key card, my ID, gets me into the park 24 hours a day. I've only been to the park during operating hours. So I
I thought it was a really cool opportunity where I got in the car, I got the best spot in the employee parking lot, and I went through security. Security had no questions of why I was there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I walked around the park, and it was serene. It was surreal of doing that. It was my first day working in the industry. And I remember seeing, maintenance doing some tweaks and inspections up here. I saw landscaping doing stuff up here. Someone was walking around over here. And it just made me realize there is so much that goes into making it look like you flip a switch and the park is open. And I think I really fell in love just with that concept. And then I wanted to dive deeper. And that's what ultimately led to me loving the business side of it, of what goes into making an experience look serendipitous to guests who are coming to visit. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because our guest today is Dennis Speigel. He's the founder and owner of International Theme Park Services Incorporated, a consulting firm focusing on feasibility, on master planning. And he shares his story of working as a ticket taker at Coney Island as his first job, and how he fell in love with the business side of the industry. And I love hearing stories like that from you. I love talking about mine. I love hearing Dennis's, of people who come into it. Maybe it is for a summer job. Maybe it's, well, they're hiring, so I'll go work there. And then you end up finding a career from it because, like you said, there's the fun in it. Obviously, there's the fun on the side of the guest, but there is the fun side of being in the industry as well.
Well, and I think what you see, especially with Dennis's career, and we're so fortunate to have him back on the podcast because we've had him on once before as we were kind of entering into the COVID pandemic. But to hear him talk about, he started as a ticket taker, and very recently he was inducted to the IAAPA Hall of Fame. I mean, talk about bookends of an amazing career, and he's still going. Let's not put him at the retirement home just yet. He is still going. He's still vibrant. He's still very much a part of the industry. But for anybody who takes that summer job, right, and starts to feel that feeling of, I think I might like to make this a career, or I want to come back for another summer, or this feels like, I'm just going to say it feels like I'm home, right? If you're feeling that way and you put your heart and soul into it and you find your niche in the industry, you could be on the verge of an amazing career. And we hear these stories all the time that people started on the front line and then they're now in very high level positions, and it's just through hard work, it's through passion, it's through being curious and wanting to know more. And what I love hearing Dennis talk about is taking the opportunities that are right in front of him. When he talks about kind of why he started ITPS, I won't go into it. I'll let him talk about it, but it's very, very organic the way it sort of came about. But it was a guy who loved what he did and just took advantage of the opportunities that were in front of him.
So I think that there's a leadership lesson that's hidden in what you just said right there, because, for those who are listening to this, who are leaders, managers anywhere in the industry, when working with your frontline staff, you could be asking yourself, could this ticket taker be inducted into the IAAPA Hall of Fame one day? And I think that can really influence the mindset of perhaps how we treat and interact with our staff who might be 16 years old, 18 years old, and maybe they're not at that level of maturity yet or that expertise, but that there's an opportunity and even a responsibility to foster that mindset, perhaps.
I love that. I love that leadership lesson. Always thinking about not the ticket taker who is 16 and that's all they're ever going to be, but what are they going to turn into later on in life, whether it's in this industry or not. And we hear all the time how the lessons that we learn in this industry, whether it's about customer service or conflict resolution or leadership or budgeting, whatever it happens to be, that we take those lessons and we either apply it in this industry or some other industry. But it's a great training ground for people who, are going on to do bigger and better things, no matter where they end up.
For sure. Absolutely. So in this interview, it's a wide-ranging conversation. He's so fun to talk to. You mentioned, we should have him on for a third time. I don't even think we got to half the questions that we put together for him, because we just came up with so much, so much more we wanted to ask him, we wanted to talk about. But we do talk about feasibility and master planning. So we're able to talk about what ITPS does. We asked Dennis for some future trends in the industry, because we know he is a wealth of knowledge, and he might as well have a crystal ball sitting on his desk, because when we had him on in March of 2020, I think it was the first time I had really understood the concept of supply chain, because he brought it up, and oh man, was he right with that prediction. And then, we talk about he says the common denominator. He's been all over the world. And he said the common denominator of everyone is that we want to have fun. And so, yeah, we talk about business a lot, but then we bring it back to, why are we in this business? Why does this business exist?
And that goes right back to what first infected me, was the fun aspect of it, right? I think we want to make sure that our guests are having fun, but also our team members. So what do you say? Let's get to this interview with Dennis.
Let's get to it. Hey, Dennis, welcome back to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you here today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys? It's hope you're well, and it's great to be back with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure. And we're looking forward to probably more upbeat conversation than we had last time, which was the beginning of the pandemic, and what can we expect all of this. And really looking back on it, I think you actually probably hit the nail on the head on a lot of your predictions as far as what was going to happen with the industry. So we wanted to have you back on to talk all about your expertise, your background, your history in the industry, and everything about ITPS. So give us a quick background and overview on your career.
Well, started out as a ticket taker at Coney Island here in Cincinnati, the predecessor to Kings Island. I was worked at the admissions gate from junior high, actually all the way through college, and it was a great summer job. And I learned the business. And it's the old saying, I'd rather be lucky than smart. I happened to be at the right place at the right time when Tap Broadcasting bought Coney Island. They just bought Hanna-Barbera Studios, and they were looking for a way to exploit the Hanna-Barbera characters, Yogi Bear, Fred Flintstone, Scooby-Doo, all of those great characters. And it all came together through Coney Island. I was graduating from university at that point in time. I had shown my interest in the amusement park industry at that point in time. There really weren't that many theme parks, just a couple. And management saw that and asked me to join the company, and literally got on the rocket ship right before it blasted off. So that's kind of what projected and took me in the direction and landed me where I am today.
So Dennis, what was it about that time back then? You're working, taking tickets and learning the business. What was it about the business that kind of got into your blood that you said, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's funny, Matt, that where I worked at the front gate, it literally was an admission gate, and everybody had to go through us. There were two sides to the auto gate that people came through. So you knew everything that was going on. If it was a meeting, if it was a celebrity coming in to perform, if management had a situation, if there was an altercation, they had to tell me what was going on to get through. And I just kind of learned the business and saw, this is a pretty exciting business. I like this. I didn't know a lot about business when I was 13, 14, 15, but I started examining and watching. And I'd come in on my days off and I would poke around the park, and I would learn and talk to everybody and find out what the business was about. On my off days, some of them, I'd go up to Cedar Point, and that was quite a different park at that time. And it was funny. I went up one Monday. Coney Island was closed on Mondays at that point in time, like a lot of parks were. Disney and Knott's Berry Farm were closed back then, believe it or not, on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I'm walking around Cedar Point. My brother was a pilot, and he flew me up in his little Piper Cub. We're walking around, and here I run into Gary Walks, Ed McHale, and one of the other managers of Coney Island, looking at Cedar Point, when they go, "What are you doing here?" And I've got a legal pad and I'm making notes. I said, well, it was a day off and I came up and wanted to enjoy the park and just kind of learn the business. And that was certainly the point of being lucky and smart. It worked out that way. So yeah. So it was a lot of fun back then. I loved the business immediately, and you could feel the heartbeat of it. And it just got in my blood, really.
Yeah. And now you've been in the business for several decades now, and ITPS, has certainly played a big role just in the industry itself. Can you tell us a little bit about just the origin story of how ITPS came to be?
Yeah, well, the true story is this. As you know, I worked at Coney Island, then we built Kings Island. I was assistant park manager at Coney Island the last 2 years of operation, which was really a wonderful experience. And then the first 2 years of Kings Island, I was assistant general manager and very active. Really, at that point in time, we would probably call that director of operations. So I had a lot of the departments underneath me, a lot of young people, and some older than I as well. And we worked through all the issues of learning the business and opening a theme park. And after that, the management said, look, we want to grow and expand. We're going to send you down to Richmond, Virginia to build King's Dominion. I was 26 or 7 years old, and they gave me $60 million. Crazy. I look back on that. And I went down and we started planning and building King's Dominion. And that was a tremendous experience from the ground up, again, after Kings Island, implementing the things we'd learned at Kings Island. We did right and we did wrong. And so I stayed there for the first 9 years. I got it through construction in the first 5 years of operation. And then they shuffled the deck, as corporations do, and moved the general managers around. They brought me back to corporate. I was vice president of operations. And when I came back, they weren't using me very well. It was a new team. And quite frankly, they were doing things that we had done 5 and 6 years before, and it was getting kind of boring. And I said, I'd really like to do something else. Well, that's when the international business was exploding. Disney had just opened Tokyo, and it was so successful. And they said, well, we're getting a lot of calls. We want you to handle that from all over the world. So I became vice president of international operations and development. So I was the guy who went out, did the feasibility studies, planted the flags. I was in China and Taiwan, Singapore, Europe, all over the world looking at markets. And I had a stack of project jackets on my desk this thick. And it was interesting. I always say Taft was a multifaceted company. It was a movie company. It was a radio, television company. It was theme parks now, had real estate, some other things. And the theme parks were the newest part of that company. And that really hadn't gelled quite well with them at that point in time. And they were looking at how they invest their monies on an annual basis. And the parks were getting a lot of that. But they were also turning down some of these projects that I had on my desk. And companies are coming to me. This is around 1980, 81. And they're saying, gosh, we'd like for you to consult or invest or work with us in some way on retainers. And we'll pay you $250,000 and we'll pay you this. And Taft kind of was blowing that off. I always said they were taking the crumbs on the table and kind of putting them on the floor. Well, to the mouse on the floor, that looked like a banquet. And guess who the mouse was? So this is a great stepping stone. So a company had come to us from England that was really well-connected, and they wanted to work with us. And they asked me to come to work with them and help drive their project. And I was looking at leaving at that point in time and starting a company. I'd been thinking about it for a couple of years. And again, it was just the right place at the right time in our industry. And I left the company, started working on this project in England, and worked with these gentlemen for 2 or 3 years, which was my stepping stone to leave I left a lot of security and a lot of perks behind when I pulled out, but I had a great vision of what was coming. And I said to my associates, I said, you know, there's enough business out there to keep us busy for 20 years. That was my window at that time. Well, it's been 40 years and we're still doing it. So I left, started ITPS, expanded the physical space of the company 5 times in the first 2.5, 3 years. Worked the way up to at one point in time. We had about 80 people when we brought everybody in from all the facets. Just kept growing the business. And I was really then continuing my travel around the world, that international travel, and capitalizing on a lot of those relationships that I'd met. I'm meeting presidents, prime ministers, the robber barons of Australia. I mean, I'd be with Kerry Packer in Australia, and then I'd be with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and then I'd be with Margaret Thatcher's campaign manager, and I'd be with a movie star out in Hollywood. It was crazy, really. There was in those early days, just traveled so much. You probably have heard me say I've amassed over 12 million air miles through the years, and that's not glamorous. You can look at this face and see that at this point in time. But I was in a 2-week period, I was in the top 10 most populated cities in the world: Tokyo, Moscow, Rio, all over the world. So it was like that. It was always crisscrossing. And it didn't stop because the industry was growing. And at that point in time, guys, there were only a couple of companies like mine. There was Leisure Lark. Mike Jenkins had a company that was doing international. We'd be going in and out the same doors all the time, bidding on projects. But there really were only about 2 or 3 of us at that point in time. So that kind of got me started and launched ITPS. And as you heard me say at IAAPA, we've worked on over 500 projects and more than 55 countries, and we have participated in some of the most successful projects here in the United States and literally all over the globe in one facet or another.
That is so fascinating, Dennis, to hear the evolution of not only your career, but how ITPS started and kind of how you saw that vision of what the business could become, right? And how you took advantage of those crumbs, right?
Yeah, sure.
I want to go back just a little bit because I'm an Ohio guy. I grew up real close to Geauga Lake, actually.
I remember you telling me.
Yeah, and I wondered if I could get just your thoughts on, you've got Kings Island, Coney Island, you've got Cedar Point, you've got Geauga Lake and SeaWorld. Like, Ohio became this hotbed for a while of real, immense entertainment. And then, of course, we all know the story about, Geauga Lake going away and that type of thing. Yeah. I'm just curious about some of your thoughts on having that many, incredible parks in a relatively small area. I mean, it's not like Orlando where they're all right on top of each other, but, to think about Ohio as like this entertainment capital.
Yeah.
I'm just curious on some of your thoughts on that.
Well, it was fun because I remember all those parks, and I'll add to that, Matt. There was Idora Park, Toledo Beach, Euclid Beach, LaSwordsville Lake. There were probably 6 or 7 more little amusement parks throughout Ohio. And the reason, of course, that all happened was because they were at the end of the trolley lines, and that's where people went from the metros to go out on the weekends and recreate, and they just grew into those kinds of recreational areas. Pennsylvania, same way. Look at all the parks that were in Pennsylvania up through New England, but still in Pennsylvania, a lot of little places. So it was fun to be here, and I knew all those people. I knew the owners. Of course, I knew the Cedar Point guys and knew the Geauga Lake guys when they took that over, and actually was called on through the years to go back in and look at some of these other projects like Wyandotte Lake and Idora and some of those, Euclid, to see if they could be resurrected in some way. And I would tell them, I think the body's on the table, but I'm not sure the heart's beating. So time had eclipsed, and the big parks had come in. But it was a great time, and it was an exciting era. And I think probably what I got to experience that a lot of young people like you guys didn't get to maybe experience so much because of evolution of the industry and time is I started with a small company like Coney Island, a private company, and was part of one of the biggest companies in Cincinnati, a public company. So I went from private to public. What an education that was, and got to see and learn the differences in running a small little family company and then running a huge and being a part of a big company. I was the youngest general manager in the industry at 28. I think Lee Darrow might have been, who was running World's Fund, might have been 29, might have been older than me. And I was the youngest vice president in TAP Broadcasting Company. And so that was a great one. And there's one other experience I have to tell you about I had, which was just phenomenal. And that memory will never leave me. And that part of my life was great. Because of Hanna-Barbera, we needed to integrate those into our parks and into our planning and into our design. And I became, for the theme park group, you had the broadcast group, the West Coast group, theme park, etc. And I became the liaison. So I had an office in Los Angeles at Hanna-Barbera Studios. And then I had one here in Cincinnati at Kings Island and at Kings Dominion when I went down there. So I was the liaison. I'm going out to the studio and I'm working with Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera and their whole team of people in all of their ancillary departments. And Bill Hanna and I formed this relationship that lasted for 28 years till he passed away. He was like a father to me and a great friend. And we not only worked together, but we recreated together. And actually was given the option early on to go to Hanna-Barbera and become Bill's assistant in the production side of Hanna-Barbera Studios. And that's when a lot of changes were happening at Taft. The new management was coming in. And the chairman of the board met with me and he said, you can do what you want. And he said, you'd be good at it probably. He said, but you can't be protected out there. You know this side of the business quite well. We're going to be growing. I'm going to let you make the decision. But if you want to go to Hanna-Barbera, we'll certainly support you. But if you want to stay here, we'll certainly, you can continue on what you're doing. And I decided to stay with the theme parks section, but that was a great opportunity. I really never looked back and said, oh, gee, what would my life have been if I'd gone that way rather than staying with the theme parks. But I always thought that was an interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
So Dennis, I'd be curious to dive even deeper into maybe some of the nitty-gritty details of ITPS and the projects that you do, and really in the way that you're able to serve the industry, and largely through feasibility studies and master planning, and really how that all comes together. And wondering if you can give us maybe just an overview of what that looks like, of putting together those plans for parks that are either brand new, just in concept phase, or those who are looking to expand or another location, as far as what the overall process looks like.
Well, it's a process. And interestingly enough, Josh, we're using today the same basic foundation that Disney used when they built Disneyland in California. When you do a feasibility study, they're more technologically advanced because we can access more things, etc. But the basics are the same. I always say to a client when they come to us with an idea, and this has been the same for 40 years, the least fun we have at my company is doing a feasibility study, but it's the most important thing we do because it charts the course for the project, like you pointed out. It it charts the course from a planning standpoint, which launches the design, which we involve the sizing components, which generate the numbers for the financials, and the marketing aspects, the safety aspects, the maintenance aspects, the employee aspects. That all comes together in the feasibility study. And we've always been fortunate because all of our people work with ITPS have worked in parks. We don't have any outsiders. They're all trench types of people. They were there. So it's not an ivory tower look at a park. So you take that feasibility study, and we did that for years. We didn't get into the design part of it initially. We just did the pre-opening operations planning aspect, which I'll talk about in a second. And as we got more involved and things started to grow and we saw what services people needed, we decided to expand our design, and we did bring in our team of designers then. And we had one whole floor of designers at ITPS. So what did we do? If we were contracted and the people liked the feasibility study, that automatically gave us the opportunity to feed that into the design process so we could get the jump on the budget and on the timing from the standpoint of feeding the information into the process as we were generating it. And it really started to work and started to gel and allowed us to expedite studies. Average study takes about 10 to 12 weeks to do. We could, in a lot of cases, get them done in 8 to 10 weeks. That would give the client the opportunity to take that study to the government, to their investors, the banks, whomever, sponsors, and show it to them and get started. And then we started saying, well, let us do the dog and pony show for you, the pretty pictures and all the renderings. And we brought our team in. We worked with, we developed a network in the industry that we worked with and still work with quite a few of them. To help us on design if we didn't have the depth that we needed. And most importantly, I think, Josh, in your question, that process of feasibility feeds the design, the master planning, design, conceptual development, and pre-opening operations, which we were the primo stars in the industry doing that. That was literally all of the programmatic and systematic work that had to be done for a park. And what we would do is we would juxtapose the pre-opening ops work with the construction. And when we would sit down with the client and say, now look, construction and the master planning and design is one thing, but you got to have the pre-opening. I mean, this is what brings the bricks and mortar to life. They get it. And we'd say, and this doesn't happen in a 2 or 3 month. This is an 18-month typical period when you're designing. So we would start that process very early on. And that went all the way through training the individuals, training on site, training, producing all the manuals, and as I said, systems and programmatic work. So it was a linear process. One other thing, we've been through some ups and downs, like roller coasters take us on rides in our industry. And when we had some recessions and turndowns and things started to slow down, one time in a period, the banks started coming to me and they'd say, look, we're working with a group and they've got this project and we're not sure they can get through this difficult period, economic period. Can you help them? So we went in and we started working with companies, existing smaller, older parks, family parks, to help them get through periods. Some of them did, some of them didn't make it. And then we became caretakers. Well, for the ones who didn't make it, the banks came to me, and this is what really blasted a whole new section of business for us. They said, can you help us sell these? So I started this network of selling. We've done about $800 million in park sales purchase and sales, M&A work. And as you know, most recently Adventureland out in Iowa for Parques Reunidos. We've done about 45 projects, buying and selling through the years. So when somebody's looking to buy or sell, or they want to know what's going on in the industry in that space, they come to me. So I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but it was kind of a circuitous path.
Yeah.
And some doors opened up, new projects, some closed things for us. But we've always tried to be at that forefront and look and see what's needed in the industry, and then jump into that boat.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, speaking of what's needed in this industry and what's maybe coming up in the industry at the time of this recording, we've all just come back from the IAAPA conference in Orlando in November of 2022. And I'm curious, from your standpoint, someone who has seen so much in the industry, what were some of your takeaways from that expo in terms of like what you're seeing coming up in the industry, or what people and operators need to be watching out for?
Well, I mean, COVID changed the world, and it certainly changed our industry. And the technological advances, Matt, that we've seen evolve and accelerate have been incredible. I was doing an investment call yesterday for a large group online, and somebody asked about the per capita spend. Why did it move so greatly during the last couple of years? Well, it was a couple of things, and I'll hit it real quick. One was when people came back in 2021, there was that pent-up demand. They were spending like drunken sailors, as we all know. And we saw per capita spending rise from 11% to 36%. And that was from Disney down to the smallest mom and pop park. And that held through 21 and carried through 22 until we were getting into the third quarter, when we started feeling some of this recession and inflation and economic issues that we're dealing with right now. But what happened? Why else was that generated? Parks were able, one, to raise prices. There was no price pushback in 2021. We had $1,000 ticket, somebody would have bought it, and a $50 Coke, and somebody said, "I'll take it." It was crazy. And what happened was prices were raised, no pushback, and then COVID pushed the touchless, cashless aspect of our business greater than we'd ever seen. Everybody jumped into that, and it forced them, because we didn't know, are people going to want to stand and touch money and walk up to a counter and put their hands on it? Remember, we're disinfecting and sanitizing lap bars and countertops and toilet seats and turnstiles, and it forced the industry to move in that direction. Well, that was one of the few good things that came out of COVID for the industry. And it's something that's going to be with us, and those per caps are going to stay up because of that touchless, cashless technology. So looking around the floor in the IAAPA this year, it's always, it's a hoot to do it. And it was amazing to see the amount of technology on the floor, the new things coming, not only from a standpoint of robotics and ways to improve service, but from the entertainment aspect, from the shows and the cinema and that aspect of it. Greatest thing, of course, for all of us, I'm sure you guys feel the same way, was just to see each other face to face again, not be Zooming. And it was, Zoom has been wonderful for all of us. I don't know how we would have gotten through the last few years without it. But to be there and have a drink with somebody and shake a hand and sit in a booth, that was phenomenal. So people were happy. It was a happy show. Vendors were happy. I talked to a lot of them, and they were buying. So that was good. People getting back in the queue line. So it was good from all of those aspects. And it's just amazing how great that show has become from when I was chairman 33 years ago.
Yeah. Dennis, do you think there's a way to bottle up that pent up demand so that it's able to, to continue flowing even as the industry has fully, or at least nearly fully, reopened? I remember just in the early days of the pandemic, we talked about pent up demand, and it almost sounded as much of a hope and a wish as it was a prediction. And then obviously it was there. But the reason the pent up demand was there was because everything was closed, because everyone was sitting at home saying, I wish I could go ride a roller coaster. I wish I could go to the movies. I wish I could go out to dinner, whatever it is. But now that everything is reopening again, it's almost as if we can easily just take for granted that the park is there. The park is open just as it was prior to COVID. So how do we keep the pent up demand going even without taking it away for an extended period of time?
Well, that's a big question, but an important question that everybody's looking at, Josh, in the industry. And I talk to everybody. That question involves social marketing. It involves how do we price in the future. It involves what type of ancillary operations do we put into play, like Cedar Fair's doing with their campgrounds or glamping, things like that have been very successful where they've done it. Conversely, you look at a situation for Six Flags right now, they're going through one of their most difficult periods the company has ever experienced. And it's so sad to see this happen. And when you see a company like that under new management, doing things that in a time that they may not understand exactly the industry they're coming into, and then the conditions that they're working under with these economic times, and lose 4 million people in a quarter like they did in this year, you've got to manage it, is the answer to your question. You're always sitting at the control panel, dialing the dials. What do I have to do? And we never have to or can lose sight of the basics of our business, the fundamentals. And people come there for a good price value relationship. And I've always told the investment community, if you look at the theme park industry, I don't care what the ticket was. It was when we opened Kings Island, I'll ask people, I'll say, today, how much was it to get in Kings Island when we opened it? And they'll go $20. They'll go $5.95. Disney was only about $7 at that time. And they go, what? So you look at it today, and you look at the tickets, and you look at the different sectors. But if you look at it and still divide it out by the length of time stayed and the value on an hourly basis, and you compare it to concerts and sporting events, a movie, you pay $12, $15 to go to a movie for 90 minutes. You can pay, well, Taylor Swift ticket may not be a good idea. Yeah, but a concert could be $200, $300. A sporting event, a pro football game could be, several hundred. They are. So, and you're only there for 2 hours, but a theme park visit is typically 6 to 7 hours. So good price value relationship, managing those kind of things and never forgetting it. I told this investment group yesterday, and you've heard me say this forever, our business lives on repeat visitation, and repeat visitation is driven by CapEx, and CapEx is new products, new ideas, the things we see on the floor mat at IAAPA, buying those and putting them in the park. And you have to continue that kind of investment. I always tell a new client coming to me, if you want to sit at this poker table, the ante's big. You got to have a lot of chips. You just don't put a few out there because it's an expensive business to be in. A roller coaster can be anywhere from, 15 to $35 million, depending on what you want to do. And that'll give you a good coaster. But when you think back to, we built Kings Island for $35 million, and Orion cost $35 million when they opened it in 20. things have changed a lot. So it's managing those things. It's keeping in check with the customer and knowing what's going on out there. And the biggest, one of the biggest issues we have to deal with is our maturity. We're a mature industry now. We're 67 years old, and we've mined these markets that we're in. There's a major theme park within 2.5 hour drive of every major metro in the United States, and some multiple, as you know. And we keep mining the ore. You have to manage the attrition, hold that here, and you have to keep it with your season pass holders. You've got to get them back every year, give them new things to make them want to come back, product and premium ideas. So all of those things come into play. It's a science in a sense.
I think it's a science in a big sense, but there's also art to it, right? Like if you think about what we do, we're selling fun. So I'm wondering if you can talk maybe on that side of things, you know, how important it is that we're getting the word out there about truly what it is that we're selling, which are memories and fun and, you know, together time. You know, yes, Orion is a great ride. I rode it this summer. I love it. But I also had a really good time hanging out with my friends. So I think there's a balance there of the hardware and then the kind of those softer experiences.
Well, there is. And I think probably the one of the things that I learned early on in the history of my career is that, particularly when I started traveling internationally, like I was, the one common denominator I found among people all over the world is they all want to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I don't give a damn who you are, how poor you are, how rich you are, where you are, you want to have fun. And if you look at our industry and how it marched around the world, you see that the fun developed in a lot of places. You take, let's take Asia for a minute. Let's take Japan and Korea. After wars, when Japan, after World War II, it was about 30 years before you really saw any development for fun because they were going through a rebuilding. And it was that pin up, let's have some fun now. Same thing in Korea after the Korean War. Then you saw Everland and Lottie World and all of these parks built. Same thing over in Europe when that happened. You saw after World War II, you saw the parks starting to develop around the European major cities. So that common denominator is always there. We are probably still one of the safest places to be on the planet. We are the premier wholesome family entertainment fun aspect. And so we do make memories. And, you know, you've heard me say at the end of my podcast, we don't put smoke in the skies. We don't pollute the rivers. What we do is put smiles on people's faces and generate memories that last a lifetime. And that's what we have always done. And, you know, Disney's been the master of that forever, from literally day two after they got through Black Monday. But, and we continue to do that. And that's what we sell. And what's really interesting, we're doing a study right now for a client, and we're looking at Gen Z and Gen A. And the great thing for our industry is both of those demos like our industry and our users. So we have people coming through. There was a period when we had millennials and some of the other gen generations that kind of faltered a little bit and held back. We're doing some other things, but the ones coming up now, they like our industry, so we need to capitalize on that.
Yeah. So there was one thing you mentioned a couple of minutes ago real quickly that I would love to come back to. And you said that the industry is mature, and then you said it's 67 years old, which doing the math would bring us to 1955, which means that the significance of Disneyland obviously cannot be understated. But why do you see that as the beginning of the industry or the age of the industry?
Well, and again, I was so lucky to be at Coney Island because Walt Disney and the owner of Coney Island, Ed Schott and Ralph Walks, became great friends because Walt Disney went around to these older amusement parks. There were no theme parks, right? He went to Pontchartrain Beach. He went to Riverside. He came to Coney Island many times, and he was looking for advice and looking for ideas, and on Disneyland. There were some who poo-pooed the idea and said, this isn't a good idea. This thing will never work. And there were some, like the owner of Coney Island, who said, I like this. This is pretty great. And I have a letter I'm going to send you guys that was from the owner of Coney Island to her daughter when she was out at the Walt Disney opening, having dinner at Walt Disney's house with Red Skelton and all these people. And she says in this letter, this isn't like anything we've ever seen before. This is going to really change the industry. Now, this was 1955, and we have this letter. It's amazing. But that, Josh, that we've marched on through those 67 years, and we've continued to evolve, expand, through technology, through the better understanding of the business, and through the people's love of our business. I mean, that's what's been amazing. The people love us. They love our industry. And as long as we continue to give them these great experiences, they will come and they will spend. So I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but that 67 years has gone by very quickly. And we are mature because we penetrated these markets deeply. So we just have to keep mining them. And population isn't booming like it was during the baby boomer period, et cetera. So.
I love hearing you talk about how, people love our industry. And I see that, when I go visit places as well. But also looking on the other side, we also have to keep, I guess, mining and cultivating the staff that is going to take care of our industry for years and years to come. So what advice or guidance do you have for people that are kind of coming up through the industry now, so that they can be successful?
Well, you've got fellows like Evan Ponstengel, who wrote that wonderful book about Kings Island. He started writing this book when he was 15. Finished it when he was 17, published it. And I'm telling you guys, if you haven't read it, read it. It is accurate, not only chronologically, but it just takes you through the true history of that park. John Barry, his father, Barry Hill, is a publisher and put out some phenomenal information on the industry. And I tell those young guys when they call me, I say, get a job in a park. Start in a park and get the roots and that be seen like I was and hundreds of other people, Jane Coopers and you name them, they all came up the same way. Al Weber's, Keith James, we all, came out of the roots of the park business. So get a job in a park, find out if you like it. The one thing you'll find out very quickly, it's kind of like being in show business. There's no gray area. You either love it or you hate it. You don't tolerate it. So you gotta work at it and find out if you like it and find out what area you like, because they're operating a theme park and building a park. Josh, back to your early question, it's like building a city. We have our own fire departments, security. We have our own restaurants. We have our own merchandise. We have our own sanitation and sewage and everything. There's a lot engineering, rides, and operate. There's a lot of places that young people can get. But you know what, Matt? I think a couple of probably the biggest issue I think facing us for the next few years is a continuation of the labor shortage. And it has impacted not only the theme park business, but look at the restaurant hospitality business in general. And we did a study for a client about 8 or 9 months ago, and they said, where are these people going? What are they doing? Unemployment's low, job opportunities are high. What are they doing? And we found out, you know what they're doing? Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub. And I ran into one of these kids young, I say kids, he was probably 19, 20. And I hadn't seen him in a while. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm my own boss. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm an Uber driver. He said, and this is what he told me. I make my own schedule, set my own hours. He said, I can work as much as I want, make as much as I want. And he said, and then I can take off a few days and go do this. And then I'm okay for a while. And then I come back and do it again. So what I think has happened is, as a result of COVID, we have created this culture that's going to be with us. This isn't going to go away. It's expanding more now than it probably ever has. And so we're seeing more people fall into that. When they do that, we lose them in our industry. And it takes a lot of people to run a theme park. And we have to figure out ways to get them again at that young area. When we opened Kings Island, we had people standing from the personnel building all the way through the parking lot out to 71 waiting. For every 10 people we interviewed, we hired one. Today, if somebody crawls to a door, you hire them pretty much. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. So that's a big problem. The industry has to attack it. IAAPA needs to attack that and figure out ways to do it. They need a ad hoc task force that comes in and says, how do we mine these young people, because they're the power that generates the parks.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could just continue on this topic and this conversation for quite a long time, and probably come up with a lot of ideas and suggestions. But we are running really low on time here. But there is one thing that I want to make sure that we don't overlook in this interview, and that is that you were just recently inducted into the IAAPA Hall of Fame, the highest award and honor in the association, really in the industry. What's that like?
Well, it's I make fun of a lot of things and always have. That's been my kind of my style. But that was truly an honor, and very humbling, as you've heard others say, to be brought into that august body with Walt Disney and Milton Hershey and Buzz Price, and it goes on, and Gustav Eiffel and Ferris and people like that, P.T. Barnum. It is a great, Josh, feeling. It was very, very humbling and really quite an honor. And I was very appreciative that they bestowed that and considered me for induction. And I don't take it lightly. I mean, I treasure it. I've always been very selfish about our industry, guys, who comes into it, how we guide and work our industry, because we're such a neat, wonderful industry. If people come in with not the right motives, I don't like that, because it is such a great industry, and I want people to come in. We want successes, not failures, and that's kind of always been my motto. So very humbling and quite an honor. I don't know how to say it other than that.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, it's incredibly well deserved. I remember even, starting off in this industry, hearing about you and ITPS. So, we've talked a little bit about how long you've been in the industry, but very, very well deserved. And it's truly been an honor to have you on the Attraction Pros podcast for the second time. Maybe we'll make it a three-peat, in a year or so. But Dennis, this has been wonderful. And if people wanted to get a hold of you or learn more about ITPS, where would you send them?
I would send them to www.interthemepark.com, INTERTHEMEPARK.com, and they can contact us that way. And we like to help people. I've got a meeting coming up in the next couple of days with one of the young people you talked about wanting to get in the business. That's always been fun for me. So anybody can call me or contact me anytime. Feel free.
Excellent. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad we had the opportunity to chat with you. For everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.